Hi, you're on the edge with me, Max Keiser. Happy New Year's Eve. And what better way to celebrate New Year's Eve than to go to Niceville, Florida, and speak with Karl Denninger. Karl, welcome back to On the Edge.
Hi, how you doing, Max?
Now, Karl, every year you make some predictions about what's going to happen in the following year, and your track record is pretty good. I would say better than just a few folks out there. I haven't done the quantitative analysis, but I believe your predictions are very high ranking in terms of their prognosticative abilities. And before we get into some predictions for this year, I want to revisit your predictions from last year. I don't want to go through the whole list, but could you mention a couple that you made last year that worked out really well, that you're particularly proud of, and then maybe one or two that didn't work out quite as well?
Well, I think one of the ones that I focused on substantially was that we were going to see a lot of deterioration and trouble coming from outside the United States. That's pretty much playing out according to plan. I think the biggest disappointment I had with my predictions for 2010 is that the unicorn phenomenon, if you will, that is the government in the United States' ability to continue to play the game of we'll pretend we have some money and you'll pretend that you're happy that we have money, has gone on for a lot longer than I thought it would. So, that has floated asset prices higher, and it has also now, it appears, led to what looks like a deal that's going to make the deficit even worse for 2011. And that's going to bear on my 2011 predictions, which are due out soon.
Okay, so you're talking about the unicorn theory, as you put it, that the Federal Reserve, as we know, they came out with quantitative easing 1 and quantitative easing 2, and presumably this would have been sussed out by the market, and there would have been more of a penalty assigned for this profligate money printing. But so far, I guess what you're saying is there hasn't been the huge consequences for all this money printing, but you see that changing going forward.
Yeah, it's, the real issue, Max, is that at some point the market is going to discern that we're just simply never going to pay back what we're borrowing, and we're running about $1.7 trillion worth of deficits in real terms. Everybody says it's 1.3, 1.2, and what they're doing is stealing the FICA tax revenues in order to make their numbers balance. You have to look at the actual borrowing that's outstanding. That's where the truth lies. And we are actually making it worse with this proposal that's now on Capitol Hill. So, the bond market has reacted rather violently to that in the last couple of weeks, and we'll see how long this game continues to be played. But I think it comes to a head sometime in 2011. Of course, I thought that it would have happened by now.
All right, let me ask you something. There's all kinds of ways to slice and dice these numbers and to look at the debt and national debt and subsets of various tranches of debt. One standout number seems to simply look at that debt ceiling, which is, I think, something like $14 trillion, and they're talking about raising the debt ceiling. If there was just one number to look at, couldn't you just point to the debt ceiling and say if it's $14 trillion and the GDP is 12 or 12.5 trillion and it's rising, that's bad, right?
Well, what I look at is the total systemic indebtedness compared to GDP. That's what I call my Ponzi finance indicator. And the spread on that over the last 30 years has been approximately 3%. And the problem with that, of course, is that exponents are a problem over long periods of time, but they look good at the moment. So you have about 3% of alleged growth that we have had over a 30-year period of time that is in fact false. And so every time that you see a growth number of, 2% in GDP growth, it's really -1. And now what we've done, since the private market has been unable to continue to expand credit, is we've shifted that to the federal government. And eventually this game ends. It's just a question of how long it goes on. And what happens, Max, is the same thing that happened to Greece and Ireland. Everything seems to be okay one day. You wake up the next morning, and the bond spreads are blowing out, and auctions are failing. And that has been the history on this crisis, and it's going to continue.
Okay, so when you say growth is -1, you're referring to how the GDP doesn't, and the inflation or inflation deflator, as it's called, it's actually kind of a misrepresentation of the actual numbers because they don't include the real components in terms of trying to get a statistical snapshot of what's going on, correct?
Well, yeah, the problem, Max, is that if I go out and I borrow $20,000 on my credit card, that shows up as GDP when I make those purchases. But I actually have not grown the economy by doing that. All I've done is pulled forward tomorrow's buying into today. And of course, then when tomorrow comes, I'm compelled to do it again, but at an even larger amount. And that's the adjustment that is not made to the GDP numbers. If you were to do that and back that out, the spread between GDP and credit growth, you would see that the numbers look much more anemic. And of course, what everybody looks at when they're looking at multiples in the stock market, or whether they're looking at the price of houses, looking at any kind of asset price, is what is the growth expectation into the future? Because what you're buying when you're buying stock is future earnings. You're not buying today's earnings, you're buying tomorrow's.
Right, and I just read a piece on your blog, marketticker.org, about including a company like Netflix into the S&P 500, which has an astronomical PE, which is going to cause all kinds of distortions going forward. But let me ask you something about the difference between the U.S. and Europe. Now, Europe is pursuing austerity measures, and we see riots. The U.S. is pursuing money printing. Is either side approaching this better? Is there a sounder way to approach this? Somebody right, somebody wrong? Are they both wrong? Your thoughts?
Well, they're both wrong in that neither of these elements has proposed taking those people who made bad loans and holding them to account. You have to take these institutions, these banks or whoever have it, you have to force them to take the write-downs and mark this credit off. The problem is if you do that, they're insolvent. And so we have a political system, both in the United States and in Europe, that is unwilling to stand up to these bankers and tell them, look, you screwed up, you are bankrupt, we're going to close you down, we're going to protect depositors, but everybody else is going to have to eat the losses that they made from their bad investments. And then you go ahead and, you say, well, there will be no banks. And my answer to that is, well, today there won't. Tomorrow, there is now an empty street corner and a need for banking, and so an entrepreneur will start a new bank. That's how we clear the economy. Europe is attempting to deal with this without money printing because they can't within the individual states of the European Union. The United States is attempting to do this through money printing because it can as a union. But if you look at states like Illinois and California, they can't print money and they're going bankrupt as well. They're attempting to do the same sort of thing that's happening over in the EU. It's not going to work.